Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful new episode of the StudioMEcast. I am your host, and today we have a very special guest. I'm not sure I believe it, but we have Mark Ruppert, the founder of the 48-Hour Film Project. We've talked about him, and now he's here. Mark, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Peter, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Super excited to have you on. And the first question I have for you is, why is it 48 hours? Why not 50 or 49 or 24 or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure it ever occurred to me to do it a different number. Um, Back when I came up with the idea, it was based on two women who had started one of the very first 24-hour theater competitions. And in their competition, you had to write, rehearse, and perform all within 24 hours. And that sounded like the coolest thing to me. And I thought it would be great in video, but I knew we needed more time. So I'm guessing that the 48 just came as a doubling of their original 24. And obviously it fits very well into a weekend, which is what our filmmaking is all about.
Now, when you first had this idea, how did you pitch it to people?
Well, I actually gathered four filmmaking friends of mine at a local pizza restaurant and pitched them the idea. If you guys put a team together, I'll put a team together, and let's see if it's even possible to make a short film in 48 hours. That was the big thing back then. No idea if it could even be done. This is back in 2001. And very shortly thereafter, a mutual friend heard about what we were doing, and she was the manager of a movie theater. So she said, if you guys do this, I'll screen them. And then word got out around town. So we managed to get 10 teams. And back in those days, there was no registration fee. There were no judges. It was just, is it possible? Can you do it? And let's watch them.
Wow. And for that first 48, were there any different restrictions than there are now as we know them?
Everything is almost identical in terms of you pull the genre out of a hat and you got a character prop in line. Back in those first few years, for some reason, we had multiple character props and lines and we pulled one out of a hat. But then we quickly realized there's no need to have multiple. You just announce the one for the city. The biggest difference, however, was the total running time. Back then, there was no limit. And in fact, our longest film was 16 minutes long, which that is a very long film to make in a weekend. And what's even more surprising is that team edited that film tape to tape or deck to deck. They did not have a computer for the editing. So it was quite an impressive feat. Now, and it was turned in on Beta SP. So that tells you how long ago this was.
That's crazy, too, because I mean, with the 48-hour time limit, you could imagine people making stuff shorter, just less time. But the fact that you're going more than a quarter of an hour is pretty crazy with that. So you started this in 2001. That's 22 years ago. So you have this really cool sort of bird's eye view of cinema through the 48, like just seeing hundreds of films all over the world. Are there any trends that you see, whether it's globally or regionally, that you've noticed with the films that have come through the 48?
Well, yes. There's always seems to be, and of course, you're putting me on the spot to remember what they are. There always seems to be a global theme each year, unannounced by us, but that things that are just capturing the filmmaker's mind and attention. So one year, for example, there were a lot of films with dead people in them, right? Were they ghosts or were they just memories? Were they really there, or just the friends remembering them? And so that was an interesting trend. And when I say a lot, I'm talking like 10 films out of the 100 that go on to Filmapalooza. So that can be interesting. Certainly over the years, what we've noticed is the big trend in terms of the technical aspect. That's easier to see. You have, prior to let's say 2014, no drones. And so then you have a couple of years where everybody's got a drone shot because it's the new big thing, right? Um, and you just watch the technical what the picture looks like gets better and better and better as the cameras have gotten better and better and better. The first couple of years, some people submitted on VHS tape, or they were submitting on mini DV tapes. And so it's been over a decade since no more tape submissions. So it's interesting to see how the trends have happened.
So when you've been doing this, you talked a bit about how there's been a gradual build up, and there were some leaps of 35 to 50 cities. Was there a point where you realized, hey, this is really taken off as a big thing?
Well, I would say it's in those years, I'm guessing it's around 2007, where we were in that 50 to 75 team numbers, 50 to 75 city numbers. And so that's where realizing that this has become a full-time business, this is something that really is speaking to filmmakers out there. And how do we keep adding more and more cities so that we did, instead of letting it grow organically with people coming to us, we started reaching out ourselves to try to add more and more cities.
And how do you do that type of outreach? Is it through film festivals that are local or through film offices, maybe?
Often it's through film offices, but through any way to spread the word. We could reach out to local film organizations within a city and to ask them to do a post to their members, telling them what the 48's all about and telling them that we're looking for a local producer. That's how the 48 is able to run in 100 plus cities each year. Is we have a whole network of city producers. A handful of them have been with us for more than 15 or 16 years, and a smaller group of them run multiple cities. Our producer in Paris, Olivier, he actually runs all 10 French cities. So
Wow.
It's through that network that we're able to keep doing what we're doing.
That's incredible. Yeah, I know Olivier. I didn't realize he did all the
Right.
wow. And those are every year that I've been to Filmapalooza, there's always a lot of films from France that we're all talking about, and we're like, man, France has really got this figured out, And so
yes.
we talk to them. We're like, so what's your story? How do you get this together? Because I love how Filmapalooza, I've learned so much personally by being there. The first year so just a little bit of background on me. I've done the 48-hour film project, I think 5 times with different teams. The first year I was the head writer, and we won and went to Rotterdam for Filmapalooza, and it was nuts, and I loved it, and I learned so much from the people there, who everyone is just very friendly, and everyone's just happy to be there. It's like, hey, we already won, and it's great to meet you. And but hearing the different techniques of workflow for how to get more done more quickly and keep the production value up, because a lot of the short films that I saw that first time out Rotterdam were some of the best short films I had ever seen in my life. Right. I had gone to a lot of film festivals. I wasn't like under a rock or anything. I don't mean they were good for being done in 48 hours. I mean, like, they were some of the best short films I'd ever seen in my life. I was like, I didn't know it was possible to do this in 48 hours. And it was one of the most inspiring moments of my filmmaking career, is just being like, oh my goodness, you can do this. And so after that, I directed a couple of 48s, which was great, and the most notable one being The Young One 2, where we got to go to the short film corner at the Cannes Film Festival, which was amazing, once again, through the 48-hour film project. And then I've also been a VFX supervisor on the horror sci-fi. But all that to say, with my background on doing the 48 here, one of the things that's always been clear is what you said there, which is the city producers are a really great team, and our city producers PJ.
Right?
I'm sure I'll get him on the podcast here sometime. He's a great guy. Everybody loves PJ, and um,
He's one of the best, that's for sure.
so, and now one of the things that I liked seeing at Filmapalooza is that the city producers are some of the most, I don't want to say motley, but like some of the most mixed bag group of personalities I think I've seen. Just this great lineup of awesome people. What is the most valuable character trait that you look for in a city producer?
I would say there are two that stand out above all the others. And one is organizational abilities, right? They have to be well organized, and having some event experience is also very important. But being organized, so that the filmmakers are confident in the events that they're putting on. And probably equally or more important to that is the passion, caring about film, and more importantly, caring about the filmmaker and his or her experience making a film, because that shows through. A filmmaker will recognize that in a city producer, that he or she cares about him, cares about the event. So if you don't have that, then you're kind of already behind in a sense in terms of having the filmmakers love what you're doing.
Well, I remember like first time at Filmapalooza, it was really clear that that characteristic came from the top with you, because when me and the rest of the Pittsburgh team met you, and we're like, oh, we're from Pittsburgh and stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, Pittsburgh, the one with the, the spies and the cowgirls, and like you knew our film, And at first, before we had seen everybody else's films, we thought, oh, maybe we're gonna get like super recognized, like he remembers ours because we won something. And it's like, no, we saw very clearly like this is our first time. We are super lucky to be here, and like it was just we saw throughout the subsequent years is that you have this really great memory for the films and the teams and the people that you meet. How do you do that?
That's a good question. It just comes to me naturally. I think it goes back to having the passion for what I'm doing, right, and for being able to provide this platform for people like you and other filmmakers around the world. And then I want to celebrate with you. Our whole team wants to celebrate with all of the filmmakers when you're at Filmapalooza. It's quite an accomplishment. For those listeners who don't know, Filmapalooza is our international film festival that happens every March, and it rotates location, location, location. So as you said, you were in Rotterdam. Then the following year, there wasn't one because of COVID, or rather it was online. Then we were here in Washington, D.C. Then was last year, well, I know last year was Los Angeles. So we did DC, then LA. And now for next March, we're going to be in Lisbon in Portugal, of course. Um, so it rotates. It's a big undertaking. It's 4 days of workshops and screenings and parties, and then the awards ceremony. But what's most important, I think you already alluded to, and that is, even though people may not speak the same language, they all speak the same art language of filmmaking. And that's the connection, that's the bond, I think, that makes everybody so welcoming to each other.
Absolutely. It's like there's a couple times where I'd be talking with someone where whatever their first language was not mine, and English wasn't their first language, and we were kind of like mixing and matching what we knew, but still connecting.
Right.
Very much like oh yeah, I love this or that, and just having like going into the first event, like the first room where everybody is at Filmapalooza at the grand opening, all that. is you just walk into this room with like maybe more than 100 people who do exactly what you do and are there
Right.
for the same reason. And it's such an awesome feeling to get that. Like, which sometimes you get that at, like, you can get that at some film festivals, you know, but it's also just the global, um, it's just like this small planet of filmmakers, you know, or something. Although it's, like just that one room is nuts. So the 48 has grown a lot since its first inception. Do you have an idea of like how you would like to see it grow more, like beyond just more countries? Is there another thing that looks like as far as the growth for the project itself?
Well, that's always a good question. I think our high number of cities was close to 120, going back pre-COVID, maybe 2018. So we've been right around 105 to 110 in recent years. So certainly we'd love to get back to more and more cities. This year we've been speaking to Belfast as a possibility of coming on. We've had interest from a couple of other English cities, Manchester for one. We've previously been in Melbourne. We're trying to find a city producer so we can get back there. So yeah, we want to get those numbers up. Just because the filmmakers love to do it, and we like to have this broad expanse of as many countries and as many cities participating. The other thing we're always trying to work on is different types of projects that might be appealing to our filmmakers. So, for example, in a number of cities, including Pittsburgh, we do something we call the special genre competitions. So, as you know, the horror sci-fi 48 is coming up there in Pittsburgh, and we have variations of that in about a dozen cities, mainly in the U.S. I was just speaking to the city producer in Atlanta today, and he's doing the special genre of holiday film. And so each team is going to get two different holidays and has to decide which holiday to build their film around. But here's the change up in that one. They can pick whatever genre they want as long as it's
Oh.
around the holiday. So kind of an interesting switch. In addition to that, with everything that's happening in AI, we're looking at doing an AI 48 pilot to see what people can do using AI as part of their filmmaking experience. And here, what we're really focused on is not AI replacing filmmakers, but rather AI being a new creative tool. What's it going to allow you to do? Certainly the first thing people think of is that they can write their script with AI. And so whether they're going to go with whatever AI spits out or they're going to use that as a draft that they then embellish further, that's up to the teams. Other people are going to use it for the production part of it. We've already had some films where AI has generated the backgrounds, but AI changes weekly, it seems. So what's going to happen? How can it be used to enhance filmmaking?
I think
Well,
that's
I
a
did tell you one funny story though about AI. It's kind of a warning to all of your listeners. So, as people who know the 48 know, we assign a character prop and line of dialogue that must be included in your film, and for that line, it must be verbatim. Well, one team had the great idea, hey, let's use AI to create a radio announcer voice to deliver the line. And so that's what they did. Clever, right? Only problem is AI, I'm the one who wrote the line. AI corrected my grammar, didn't say the line exactly the same way, and that film was disqualified.
Oh no. Oh my
So
goodness.
beware of AI.
Wow. That's a cool, that's also got a neat lesson in it as far as still making sure it's a tool, like it's something that can definitely enhance or like add a new element to the workflow, but you
Right?
still got to pay attention to it, at least for now. I think the idea of an AI 48 is a great idea, because something that I've been seeing a lot of artists talk about is they've had a very negative reaction to AI, and it's pretty obvious why. And there's just about every single story about AI is a warning, you know.
Yep.
And there's a lot of ways that this thing could end up being really bad or negatively affect people's lives. That's what a lot of the strikes are about. But something that I've been trying to advocate, and I think that's a good thing about the strikes, is that they are trying to get in front of AI. But one of the things I like about what you're doing there is AI's coming. You can't stop that. All right, it's happening faster than the people making it know it is, and the best thing to do, in my opinion, is not to just keep being in denial that it's a thing. What we have the opportunity for right now is to define how it's going to be used, because that has not been figured out yet. And, it's like what people have been talking about Oppenheimer a lot, because of that film coming out. Just because we have created the means to destroy ourselves doesn't mean we have yet. So it's like, if we, the world kind of got together, it was like, wait, we don't all want to die, right? It's like with AI, but the solution to that isn't necessarily just don't build the bomb and hope no one else does. It's so I think the idea of having a competition where it's like, hey, let's mess with this thing, let's figure it out, let's help define how it's going to be used. I think that's a great idea, because I've been trying to think of more ways for people to do that. I've been telling artists, like, you really should embrace AI and just get better at it than other people, and figure out how to use
No,
it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's the people, and I've heard others say this, the people who know how to use AI efficiently and to enhance their work or their hobbies, they're the ones who are going to succeed much more than those that are hiding or just afraid of AI.
Mm-hmm. Especially in this film of digital media, medium of digital media. It's like, when photography came about, painters were saying a lot of the exact same things. Like, oh, well, don't you want something that's made by a person, and like, oh, that's not real art and stuff. And it's like, we're having the exact same conversations. And the thing that I know now is, are there a bunch of painters out there? Yes. Do they occupy the same position in society as they did before? Not necessarily. And it's kind of like, at this point, it's like, I know painters, like professional, that's their full thing, is painting, which is amazing that they do that. But at this point, the average person knows more painters who are dead than ones that are alive. And I think part of that could be sort of a, what's the term for it? It's an example from before that we can learn from, perhaps. And it is going to change stuff, but we haven't figured out exactly how yet. And so I think that's great you're doing that. Now, AI has been a big upset. It's created a lot of, whether you think they're expected or unexpected things, with the 48 from when you started it out. Is there anything that the 48-hour film project has done that you didn't expect that surprised you?
Well, I guess the first thing that happened was the impact on the local community in each city. Is that the 48, in many cases, built up the film community. Whether it, I don't know how often it created a film community, but it certainly enhanced a lot of film communities. And that's, I think, in large part because we have so many in-person events. In each city, we try to have 2 or 3 networking events ahead of the competition weekend. Competition weekend is, of course, the kickoff is in person. You must attend to participate. So people are getting this opportunity to meet other filmmakers, other people with the same passions that they have. And then, of course, our screenings. You not only get to meet all of these people again, but you get to see what they worked on. You get to see to do things like, oh, I love the cinematography in this film. Who's that cinematographer? I'm gonna go talk to him. Maybe we can collaborate. And that's been a lot of fun to see the different collaborations. Remember, we had people who lived halfway around the world from each other, met at Filmapalooza, and then embarked on a couple of projects together. So that's great.
That's definitely been the case in Pittsburgh. And anytime someone comes into StudioME here and asks about independent filmmaking in the city, I always tell them to get involved with the 48-hour film project. I tell them about the networking events. And it's great that we often have the horror sci-fi here as well, because with having multiple events, it means you don't have to wait too long before they can get involved with something. And also that's where a city producer comes in handy as well, because the Facebook pages and everything are super active, and it's still really easy to get involved with here.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really, really for an industry and a medium that is notoriously difficult to break into, having something that basically all over the world, pretty much anybody can show up and say, hey, I would just like to be involved, and someone's going to snap them up and say, you're our guy now. It's like, yes, we need someone to do this thing, even if you've never done anything. It's like there's all like people are, it doesn't feel like it's gated or elitist or it's not tight knit. It's very welcoming, and I've seen that from all the people from all over the world who have done the 48, and it's led to so many wonderful relationships being developed, where it's like, I go to Filmapalooza, and then half the people I meet there end up being a guest on this show, and it's just like, hey, let's keep talking. I want to talk a bit more about you started more like anybody who's doing anything with film tends to start with being interested in filmmaking and doing that. And you've, as the founder of the 48, become also just a really prominent, a prominent part of your life is event organization, I guess is what you'd say. How did you have experience with organizing events before the 48, or is that something you kind of learned as you went?
Definitely had experience doing that before. Let's see. I attended law school, University of Maryland, and in my third year, I was elected the president of the Student Bar Association. That does not refer to a pub type bar. That is the Student Legal Association. And so I put on a lot of events at the school. And so that was probably my first formal experience of putting on events. From there, I moved on and was the executive director for a local chamber of commerce. And again, that has a handful of events every year, whether it's the 10K race or the annual, board dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So again, gaining the experience. And I left that job to pursue filmmaking. So I had taken a couple of classes at night. It had been a long time passion that I kind of pushed to the side. And finally, I said to myself, there are thousands of people out there doing this. I'm going to do it. So started my own small video production company, and then besides having the client work, I directed a couple of short films. And so this is at a DC networking event. I met Liz Langston, and so she had written a couple of scripts. I was interested in directing, so we actually made those films. And then later, Liz was instrumental in launching the 48 after we had done that very first DC 48. She was the co-founder in launching the expanded 48, and she worked with us until 2017, I believe. And so just to finish this story, I started as a filmmaker, and then after the 48 took off, I'm no longer a filmmaker. I'm an event producer. So that's where I am.
Well, it's like gotta be an absolutely intense whirlwind putting all this stuff together with the team and everything. Is there a moment that you enjoy the most, like in the timeline? I mean, of like
Right.
year round. Is it when the lights go down at Filmapalooza and you're gonna watch something, or like when's the best moment for you for what you do?
I would say it's Filmapalooza.
Yeah.
Everybody's there. It's the culmination of the entire year. We get to announce that the winning film. And sometimes you go into that awards ceremony and you know what the judges, because they've decided 2 weeks in advance, you know what they've picked, and you're skeptical. Okay, what's the audience going to think? And then to be very gratified that the audience erupts when the winner's announced. And earlier you had talked about the great French films, and of course there have been a whole lot of great Dutch films. In fact, prior to this year, for the previous 10 years, it seemed like it was always a Dutch or a French film that was winning the whole thing. And so this was the first time in more than 10 years that a U.S. film finally took home the prize.
Wow.
And so it was the film Threshold from Jacksonville. And again, to see the audience give them that reaction when it was announced, it was great. Great day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's a good answer, you know. It's like it all goes up to that. So right after Filmapalooza, do you get to take a break? Do you get to just relax and just chill out, you know?
Yeah, I take a little break after Filmapalooza, and then pretty shortly thereafter, we're getting ready for the new tour. Filmapalooza happens mid-March, and then about the first weekend of May is when we start up with our first cities of the year. So it does start pretty quickly. What I like to do is to visit different cities at different times. So that's a little getaway. It's always great to reconnect with filmmakers and to see what's happening in the local area. I haven't trying to remember for this year. Well, last year was more because I did from Portland, Maine, all the way down to Richmond. And so saw a bunch of cities. So year to year, I try to add in some of that, and that makes it always a lot of fun.
Whenever you're going out to make any kind of venture, particularly filmmaking, there's going to be a lot of challenges along the way. All right. And over the course of 22 years, and with how massive an event this is, I imagine there's some things that have gone wrong. Is there something that went wrong that what's a time when something like that happened, and what did you learn from it?
Well, problem solving and preparation are the two things you learn from doing not only event management, but even filmmaking. Is one of the things that we talk about of what does a filmmaker get out of making another film in a 48? Well, I don't care what level you come in at on Friday, at the end of it, even whether you're brand new or you're seasoned, you've learned something in that weekend, right? You come out a better filmmaker. But one of the things that it doesn't matter if you're on a low budget film or a Hollywood blockbuster, something's going to go wrong. And so the 48 teaches you that skill of problem solving, overcoming, et cetera, et cetera. For us as event planners, event producers, we used to have more problems early on because the technology wasn't as good, right? So I can remember the very first year of running the San Francisco 48. I was out there running it myself, and I had found an editor through a friend of a friend. And so the drop off was Sunday. The screening was Monday. So we had 24 hours essentially to get the tapes mastered and onto a tape for me to take to the theater. So at 4 o'clock, he's finished. He's ready to hit render and print the tape. He leaves because he has an appointment. Well, 15 minutes into it, the system shuts down. So I'm freaking out. Make a bunch of calls. Finally, somebody gets in and can get it generating again. Long story short, I left with the first 30 minutes of the screening in my hand, hoping that the remaining hour would make it before the first 30 minutes ended. Whoa. And thank God it did. So that's kind of the nerve-wracking things we went through in the early days. So the very first thing we did is said, okay, no more Monday after drop-off screenings.
Yeah, forget that. Oh my goodness.
Most of them happen now about a week later, quite often. Mm-hmm. So we've had similar things like that. I remember in New York, we were playing from a mini DV tape, but we brought a backup DVD, and sure enough, mini DV went bad, so we put in the DVD, and then that was Group A, and then 2 hours later we were screening Group B, so we're like, okay, forget the mini DV, let's start with the DVD. That went bad, so then we had to get the mini DV, and that worked. So.
Oh my gosh.
You just never know what you're going to encounter, and trying to remain calm, project that calm to the filmmakers and the audience, and then to correct the situation in whatever way it requires is all you can do.
Filmmaking has never ceased to amaze me, to just show how things can go wrong that seem impossible to go wrong. Like it's like this should work, and that's nuts. So what a great story. Now the 48 has shown such a wide variety of work over the years. Like just the few years that I've seen it have blown me away. Whether it's the types of genres, the production value, the brilliant writing. It's like, how did you write something this good in this amount of time? And there was the team from, I believe it was South Africa, that had the film that was about a radio show. And yes, and we were watching that, and I was just like, this is so good. This is so well written. How did you do this? And we talked to them, and they said, well, basically, we wrote everything up through like Saturday night, and then we filmed it. Like we front loaded the writing. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, And I'm like, but still in that amount of time, it was brilliant, wonderful stuff. There's been musicals, there's been kung fu fights, there's been I haven't seen this film, but I saw an interview where he talked about, I think it was in Albuquerque, there was a team of horses in one of them. It was like the biggest team ever up to that point, where
115 people and 30 horses.
Man, I thought I had a lot on my team when we had like 30 or 40 people. That's nuts. So that being said, okay, is there anything that you haven't seen yet that you that maybe you and the city producers talk like, I wonder if this year is the year that someone does this film we've been waiting for, or anything? Is there something you haven't seen yet that is that anything that comes up?
That's a very good question. We never frame it in that, or I don't frame it in that way. We could ask some of the city producers if they ever frame it that way. It's more of a sit back and see what comes in, and then be like, oh wow, we've never seen that before, or they've taken this to a new level, that type of thing. So that's kind of where how I approach it. But yeah, there's so many films over the years that have been so great. There's this one, I don't know if you've ever seen it, called Mimes of the Prairie. And so this was done Ken Burns documentary style. Their genre was mockumentary. And back in the old days, the 1800s, there were three peoples that populated the West. It was the Native Americans, the settlers, and the mimes. And it was just hilarious, this film. Another one that I enjoyed from Las Vegas years ago was another mockumentary, and it was a mockumentary about the Last Supper. And so Matthew calls the apostles over and says, okay, guys, what's it going to be? Are we going to do catered or are we going to do potluck? It's the night of the Last Supper, and Matthew calls Peter over and says, Peter, I thought I asked you to organize the potluck. What do you see on the table? Peter says, bread. Matthew says, yeah, a whole lot of bread. What about the salads? What about the dessert? And Peter says, sometimes you get bread, sometimes you get other things. And I just thought that was hilarious. So we've certainly had a lot of comedies over the years. It's interesting to know at Filmapalooza that dramas or comedy dramas seem to rise to the top. I don't know if that's a case of certainly the old saying about comedies. It's harder for them to appeal cross-culturally than more difficult than a drama can appeal cross-culturally. It's really great. Always fun to see what comes in and what ideas filmmakers have.
Why don't you tell us about the Yes We Can?
Sure. So one of our new projects we started last year is a special invitational competition that only the first, second, and third place teams in each city are eligible for. And so this is called the Yes We Can as in the Cannes Film Festival, Yes We Can Global Film Challenge. And we invite these first, second, and third place teams to make another film in the first weekend of December. And of those submissions, the top 15 go to Filmapalooza, and from those 15, the top 8 are included in our group that goes to the Cannes Film Festival. So essentially, it's a second opportunity for these teams to make it further along, and especially for our second and third place teams who came this close to winning their city. They're very eager to prove that the judges were wrong and that they can do it again. And so last year was our first year doing that, and that was a whole lot of fun. And we're bringing it back this year. So first weekend of December.
Well, that's fantastic for people to look forward to. And our audience knows that to follow up with this kind of thing, you can just look in the description. There'll be links there to the 48 Hour Film Project website, so you can check out some of the films we're talking about and more of those kinds of news. Mark, it's been a pleasure to know you. It's been great to have you on here as a guest. I'm really glad that we could make it happen, and I'm just really excited to see how the 48 develops and grows over the next several years. The 48 has been a hugely positive impact on my life personally. I wouldn't just propose anywhere, and so thank you so much for creating this thing. It's led to so many great relationships that I've been able to form with people, and led to so many opportunities, and a lot of the, greatest leaps of growth for me personally as a filmmaker have been through the 48. But I just want to take a second to thank you for that.
Well, my pleasure, and I thank you for being a 48er and coming back year after year, and I love your films. So
thank you very, very much for being my guest today.
Well, Peter, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it a lot.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, that's our show, and if you just can't wait for the next one, why don't you go back and watch one of the other ones we've already done, and that might tide you over until next time. See ya. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.